So we got the first round of the college football playoff, first ever expanded 12-team playoff. We got some really good matchups. So let's start with Tennessee, Ohio State. This is obviously like the matchup of the weekend, in my opinion.
By far, this
Yeah,
is the best matchup of the weekend.
yeah. I mean, two really, really good teams. Uh, I was just looking up totals, how they rank across the country. And, Tennessee is actually ranked highest in total offense of all the first round teams. So that's interesting. And they're also one of the top rushing offenses in the nation, obviously with Dylan Sampson. But then you look at Ohio State, their defense has been amazing this year. Number one in total defense and scoring defense.
Right.
And they played the 29th hardest schedule. So that's some pretty rock solid numbers. But then Tennessee's defense isn't far off. They were number 4 in total defense. So,
And number 4 in scoring as well.
yeah, this is going to be an awesome matchup. It's going to be interesting, especially to see if the Tennessee fans were able to get tickets to the shoe. I mean, they were talking about taking it over.
Yeah, just based on chatter online today, ticket prices for all of the games across the country are dropping drastically. The highest one is Notre Dame, Indiana, and that's a state championship game. I think you could get into this game not much more than $100. And those Tennessee fans, they got this campaign going to buy up those tickets and try to take over. And the Ohio State fans aren't believing it's going to happen. But you give an SEC school a chance to buy your tickets in your stadium, they're probably going to take advantage of it. It's going to be cold in Columbus on Saturday. I think predicted highs in the 20s somewhere. I don't think that's going to be quite as much of a factor because Tennessee is at least a team that, sometimes does experience some cold weather up there in the mountains. But this game really is going to come down to the running games. Like, who can really get their running game going? Obviously, Tennessee relies heavily on Dylan Sampson. Ohio State coming into the year had this two-headed monster at running back, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, supposed to be an awesome rushing offense. It's really going to come down to that because especially if it's cold and if it's windy, snowy, whatever it might be, whoever can get that running game going is really going to help dictate how this game goes.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because you look at the quarterbacks and, we've said this before, Will Howard is a liability on that offense, which is kind of shocking when you think about it because everybody pretty much agrees that Ohio State has the best wide receiver room in the country. So if you have the best receivers, a guy like Will Howard should be able to find pay dirt a lot easier than a lot of other teams. But he was a big reason why Ohio State lost to both Oregon and Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan was able to push them around. I think Ohio State's got some injuries on the offensive line.
Yes,
which is part of the issue that they're having up front. And the inability to get the running game going, particularly in the Michigan game. It looked like in the Michigan game, they really wanted to control that game at the line. They wanted to run the ball, but they couldn't get it going. Howard made a couple mistakes, threw a couple interceptions, and that kind of, switched the game up. Ohio State's offense, is still pretty balanced. Like you said, they have a very good, deep wide receiver core and a deep running back room. On the Tennessee side, Nico Amayalava has been a solid quarterback this year, if not spectacular in his first year of starting.
job.
Yeah. He hasn't put them in a lot of bad situations, but he hasn't had the crazy numbers that you often expect out of a Josh Heupel offense. He didn't put up the numbers that Hooker put up a couple years ago and didn't make the mistakes that Milton made last year, but still just not the hype hasn't quite been there in that offense. One of the most interesting things about Tennessee's offense is they're very balanced. Like I said, eighth overall in the country, but they're only 60th in explosive plays in the country, which for a Josh Heupel offense predicated on go fast, get those wide spreads, get the guys down the field, hit deep balls. That was shocking when I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah. I see three main keys here for, how this game's going to go. We already talked about the run game, whoever can run the ball the best, but also which quarterback is going to step up and make the bigger plays. Who's going to be able to hit that deep shot chunk play. Um, Whoever is able to do that, that's just going to help the running game even more. But one I think to really watch for is penalties. So Ohio State is tied for seventh for fewest penalties in the country. So they're a very unpenalized team. Tennessee, on the flip side, is a very highly penalized team in both number of penalties and yardage. So that could put Tennessee in bad situations where they're forced to throw, and being forced to throw against that Ohio State defense is not a place where you want to be.
Right. I think that, this game really comes down to if Tennessee can get the running game going, that should open up a little bit on the outside for the pass. One thing that you noticed in the Georgia game, they got up early in the Georgia game, but they didn't hit any of those big explosive plays outside of the long run for the touchdown by Sampson. They didn't have any long pass plays that they were hitting, so they had to try to rely back on that running game. And once Georgia was able to kind of shut it down a little bit in the second half, Georgia steamrolled them. And I think this could be a similar situation. If Tennessee can't get their deep passing game going and they're totally trying to run the ball and they can't, Ohio State will totally shut them down and potentially blow them away. Not that I think that Ohio State is a much, much better team. I think these are both quality teams. I think if I was ranking, I think these are probably two of the top 6 teams in the playoff. Having this as an 8-9 matchup is nuts to me, because I think whoever wins this, the winner of this path ahead is insane to get to a potential championship game. The winner of this game is going to face Oregon, and then would potentially have to face Texas, and then potentially face Georgia if all the cards fell right. So if the winner of this game goes on to win the national title, they certainly deserve it. I will say that much, despite them both having 2 losses and not played in the conference championship game.
Yeah, these two teams have quite the gauntlet ahead of them, for sure.
So the line on the game, Ohio State's favored by 7. Pearl, who do you think is going to win this game?
I still think Ohio State's going to win. They've got a better roster there at home. Playing on the road is tough no matter where you're going. But I think it's going to be close, because Tennessee is, in my opinion, a very, very dangerous team in the playoff, just with the fact that they're top 10 in both offense and defense, and they've been playing really quality opponents in the SEC.
Yeah. I agree. I think Ohio State's going to win. As much as I have respect for both these schools, I think Ohio State is just deeper and more talented than Tennessee is. I think playing at home will have a factor in this game. I'm going to take Ohio State to get this one done.
Awesome. All right, next big matchup is number 12 Clemson at number 5 Texas. We got a 11.5 point spread right now. Texas is favored, which I think is pretty spot on. So digging into these stats, Clemson is really good on offense. They're number 12 total offense in the country, so that's the second highest in the first round. But their defense has been bad. 66.
Which is very uncharacteristic for a Clemson team that even in the first game of the year when they played Georgia, Georgia kind of steamrolled them in the second half, but they looked very solid, particularly on the rush defense in the first half of that game.
Yeah.
It's just surprising. I saw that as well, to see Clemson fall that low, because the last few years, obviously when Venables was there, but just consistency year to year under Dabo. The one thing that they still have, even though Dabo hasn't taken transfers or anything, is they still have a very talented defensive roster. They've got a couple of awesome 5-star players that they took out of the state of Georgia. So yeah, that was very surprising to see that they've kind of fallen that low. Obviously, we know about Texas's defense. We've heard all about it coming into the SEC championship game. consistently one of the better defenses in the country.
Yeah, Texas is probably the most dangerous team in the first round, just because of their defense, number 3 total in total defense, and we know that the offense can light it up. It just depends on which version of Quinn Ewers you get, or if they start throwing Arch Manning in there a little bit more.
I think you're definitely going to see Arch in this game. I'm very surprised we didn't see more in the SEC championship game. I think they are going to try to shy away from kind of the strategy that looked like they took against Georgia, which was pass heavy. I mean, Ewers threw it almost 50 times. I think they are going to lean back into their run game. They're going to get Arch involved to kind of give a change up out there, and let Ewers have a little bit of the pressure off him, because Ewers threw for a ton of yards against Georgia and at times, looked very, very solid. But when it came, towards the red zone and stuff, that's when he struggled. I think they're going to want to keep that pressure off him, because he seems to thrive in that environment where he's not necessarily having to be at the forefront. When they get that running game going, he really does well. So I think that, the strategy for Texas will be to keep pass attempts down, try to run the ball, get Arch involved, and get an early lead, and then kind of just beat Clemson down, because I think they are a little bit stronger on the defensive side. Now, the one thing I could foresee this game going a little bit towards Clemson, I know I just talked a lot about Texas. If both teams' defenses come out and are not having good days, meaning both teams are finding success and it's a higher scoring game, that's an area where I could see Clemson actually taking an edge. If it's a lower scoring game, or if it's, Texas beating them down, I think Texas wins easy. If it's a high scoring game, kind of gives me a little feel of 2022 Georgia versus Ohio State. Two teams with pretty good offenses that if they get rolling, they can really score a lot. And two good defenses, but when your offenses are cooking, you can throw good defenses out the book. So that's the one chance I see for Clemson. Kind of key players in this game. Obviously for Clemson, it's going to be Klubnik. Everything runs through him. He's got a lot of rushing yards, almost 500 rushing yards on the season, 33 touchdown passes, only 5 interceptions. So really good stats for Klubnik this year. For Texas, I think it's on the defensive side of the ball. Mukbucko had a great game against Georgia. I think he plays, a key role in them, limiting Clemson. So for my pick here, I'm going to go with Texas. I think they're going to put it down and they're going to beat them pretty good. What you got?
Yeah, I think Texas, and it's not even going to be close. It's just too much defense, too much talent on that Texas roster. And with Clemson's defense being how it is, I think it's a perfect situation for Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns.
All right. So moving on, the next game we've got on the schedule is the Indiana State Championship. We've got the Indiana Hoosiers, number 10 in the rankings, heading out to South Bend to take on the number 7 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Irish come into the game favored by 7.5 points. Obviously, a lot has been written about both of these teams. Indiana because of their out of nowhere rise this year. Notre Dame because of that horrible loss early in the season, but then recovering and moving through in this new playoff world. So, Burl, what's your early impressions on this game?
This is one of the more interesting games, in my opinion, because both teams technically have really good defenses, stat-wise. This kind of blew my mind. Indiana is number 2 in total defense in the country, but they have the 67th hardest schedule. I don't even think you can say hardest schedule.
That's right. They played outside of Ohio State. They played the bottom 8 teams in the Big Ten. How did that happen? I have no clue, but it did. But you can only play the schedule that you have. You can't change the schedule in year, and it is a Big Ten schedule. They had the defending national champion on their schedule, and they beat them. They had another team that was in the playoff last year in Washington, and they beat them. So you can't knock them too much. I think Indiana this year really, really, really driven through their quarterback, Rourke. They've relied on him a lot to distribute the ball. And they've, like you said, they've won it with defense and scoring quick. But then on the flip side, you've got Notre Dame, and everybody points to that early season loss at Northern Illinois as kind of the sign, oh, maybe, Notre Dame's not that good. They're paper champion. Their schedule didn't end up as great as it has in the past. But I did take a look at Notre Dame since that loss to Northern Illinois. They have scored 49 points or more in 6 of their last 10 games, all victories. And in a couple of those games, I think 3 or 4 of them, they've scored more than 50. So Notre Dame has been scoring a lot of points throughout the second half of the season. They really are built on their run game. Of course, they've got Riley Leonard at quarterback. He, transfer from Duke, runs the ball a lot. They've got 2 outstanding running backs in Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. And then their defense is led by Xavier Watts. Great defensive back. He's got 5 interceptions on the season, 8 pass breakups. So you've got some stars out there for Notre Dame. I think this is going to be a tough task for Indiana. What do you think is going to happen in this game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Indiana. Notre Dame, I mean, they're kind of playing SEC football in a way, right? They play really good defense. They're number 9 in total defense. They actually lead the nation in defensive touchdowns, which is interesting. And then you've got that 3-headed monster rushing attack, Love, Leonard, and Price. Then they're all close to 1,000 yards on the year. So playing, especially this time of year, playing good defense and having a good running game, that will take you very far in a playoff run. And with it being at Notre Dame, I think it's going to be tough for Indiana. I think they're going to have a hard time moving the ball against Notre Dame. And I see Notre Dame running away with this one.
Yeah. I mean, much like I said a few weeks ago when Indiana went to play Ohio State, I think their schedule, they took advantage of it. And like I said, you can only play your schedule. But that being said, I think Notre Dame's going to play bully ball with them. I think they are bigger and stronger up front. And like you said, that 3-headed monster of Leonard, Love, and Price is going to run all over Indiana. I just don't think they have enough stars on offense to keep up. They've got a couple nice receivers, Surratt and Cooper, but they don't have blow-you-away stat. They distribute the ball out a lot, but nobody really pops out on the page. So I'm going to take Notre Dame to cover in this one.
Awesome. And the final game is number 11, SMU, the Pony Express at number 6, Penn State. Penn State's favored by 8.5. This one's probably the least interesting game to me. I mean, SMU, it's hard to take them serious right now. I mean, just looking at their stats. They're number 20 total offense, number 28 total defense. You play the 57th hardest schedule. They are the most penalized in terms of yards team in the nation.
Interesting.
So very undisciplined going against a Penn State team that, for all accounts, we know that they can't win the big game, but this seems like a very winnable game for Penn State.
Yeah, I think a couple of factors here. Obviously, playing at home, Penn State will have a huge advantage. At having a whiteout, and heck, it might be a snow whiteout. I think the weather will play a factor in this game. SMU is a southern team, and going up there playing on the road, cold weather, I think will favor Penn State a lot. I think you got to look at Penn State's second half versus Oregon as well. They were down and they were getting throttled pretty good in that game. They fought back, and they fought back on Drew Aller. SMU is weak against the pass. That's where they're susceptible on defense. So if Drew Aller plays like he did in that second half of that Oregon game, that bodes very well for the Nittany Lions to win this game. They've got two good running backs who have over 800 yards, in Singleton and Allen. One interesting thing that happened this week was Penn State's backup quarterback, Bo Prebula, jumped into the transfer portal. Why that is interesting is because earlier in the year, Drew Aller was injured and had to miss a game. And so he likes to run. In the cold weather, when you run, oftentimes you see more injuries. And so Penn State's going to go into this game without an experienced backup quarterback. So if something happens to Allard, there's a chance for SMU to hop in this game. SMU, relies heavily on the big play. Kevin Jennings drives that offense. Rashard Smith's got 1,200 yards, 14 scores. The receiving score is pretty spread out. Nobody has more than 38 receptions on the year. So they like to spread the ball around, give it to the running back, and let their quarterback drive it down the field. This is going to be a tough matchup for SMU, though. Penn State is bigger. They're at home. They run the ball well, and they have a good quarterback. Both teams are coming off close games where they played well in the second half of their conference championship games. But once again, as it looks like with all these games this week, I'm going to go with the favorite, Penn State at home.
Yeah, I think it's Penn State, no doubt here. It's going to be tough for SMU to play up there. Like you said, they're very reliant on big plays in the passing game, and cold weather makes it really hard to throw. And if you can't dominate on the ground, then they're gonna have trouble there. So, maybe the quarterback can get out of the pocket and do some running. As I know Jennings he can run the ball. But I look for Tyler Warren to have a really big game for Penn State. He's kind of their, universal do everything type player. We'll say poor man's Brock Bowers. So I think this is a game for him to have a big game, because if it's bad weather, and you're throwing the ball at all, you look to your tight ends as your security blankets there, and with him, they can get him involved a bunch of different ways in the run game, pass game. So give me Penn State. That defense is, I think it's just going to be too much for SMU.
All right. So that wraps up the 4 games that we have this weekend in the first round of the college football playoff. The second round games will start up around New Year's, but there's also a lot of bowl games that will be going on between now and then. I think the only significant bowl game happening this week is Florida is playing Tulane, which could be interesting to kind of see, if they continue to progress. But no other notable bowl matchups this week outside of these college football playoff games. Once again, thank you for tuning in and listening to the show. We really appreciate everybody checking us out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment, and we'll get back to you. But until then, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.